One person who understands breast cancer all too well and is an incredible asset to our collective work is Tai Harden-Moore. I interviewed Tai last year for a piece that we shared on the air at K103, and when I met her for the first time in the lobby of the radio station with her family, I was humbled to see this beautiful young woman connected to an oxygen tank to help her breathe. I immediately thought how lucky I am to be able to look at my own breast cancer journey from the other side. Tai is an inspiration and a bright, positive light. She's living with metastatic breast cancer and our important keynote speaker tonight.
And of course, Tai is our African American Initiative Manager, including DEI work that we're doing as an organization. And I couldn't be more grateful she's part of our Komen team. So without further ado, let's hear Tai's story.
Hi, I'm Tai Harden-Moore, African American Initiative and DEI Manager at Susan G. Komen Organ in Southwest Washington. In 2010, I made the life-altering decision to follow my dreams and move my family across the country to attend law school at Florida A&M University College of Law. When I made that decision, I had no idea how much my life would change. Less than 1 year later, at the end of my first year of law school, I was diagnosed with stage 3 inflammatory breast cancer at age 31. My breast cancer symptoms began a few months before I was diagnosed. I had no lump. Instead, I experienced swelling and redness in my right breast. At the beginning, I largely ignored it, thinking some strange Florida bug had bitten me or that I was having a reaction to the Florida's blistering summer heat. Eventually, the swelling got so bad that my right breast was twice the size of my left breast. I knew something was wrong, so I asked my husband to take me to the emergency room, and he did. While there, I asked the doctor if it was possible that I had breast cancer. At the time, I knew nothing about inflammatory breast cancer, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. I asked for a mammogram and was told no, because I was too young to receive one and I didn't have a lump. The doctor tried to convince me that my symptoms were nothing to worry about and I simply had an infected milk duct and a round of antibiotics would clear it right up. I agreed to go home with the prescription for antibiotics, but not without a referral to an OBGYN to follow up with. After 10 days of antibiotics, my breast was even more swollen and red and now looked like the peel of an orange. So I went in to see the OBGYN that the emergency room doctor referred me to. She walked in, and after a brief introduction, she began her exam. She closed my hospital gown as quickly as she had opened it, took my hand, looked me in the eyes, and said, "I'm sorry, honey, but you have breast cancer." At that moment, it felt like time had stopped. After a few moments of panic, I began to listen to her again as she explained what would happen next. I would go for an emergency mammogram that she was sure would indicate breast cancer, and then I would have a biopsy to confirm it. She then explained that inflammatory breast cancer is rare, but very aggressive, so we had to move quickly. As my head continued to spin, she politely asked if her fellow could come in to view my breast, since this may be the only time that they get to see inflammatory breast cancer in real life, and I obliged. Once they left the room and I was alone, all I could do was cry. How was I going to tell my husband? What was I going to say to my kids, who were only 4 and 5 at the time? Would I be able to finish law school? What did all of this really mean? What was I going to do? I walked out of the office and I called my husband, Andre, as I walked to the car. When he answered, I took a deep breath and I said, "I have breast cancer." Needless to say, he was just as shocked and upset to hear the news as I was. I didn't know what to say to him. I was still in a daze myself. So I told him we would talk when I got home. Next, I called my parents in Seattle. Like Andre and I, they were also shocked and devastated. A couple of days later, I had a mammogram and a biopsy and anxiously awaited the results. I was hoping against hope that this was all a mistake and I was fine. As I sat in my law school's atrium on the afternoon of July 18, 2011, waiting to head to my criminal law class, my phone rang. It was the doctor, and she said, "I'm sorry, but your biopsy results came back, and both tumors are cancer. Judy, the patient navigator, will be in touch with you tomorrow to help." I knew in that moment my life was forever changed. The next day, I spoke with Judy and learned that the first thing I needed to do was to find an oncologist. You would think that that would be pretty simple, but it wasn't. I was an unemployed law student and I was on state Medicaid insurance. Every oncologist office that I called either didn't accept Medicaid or stated that I needed to be seen at the free clinic first and then referred to their office for treatment. And that process could take 1 month or more, time I did not have. So I called Judy back, crying and pleading for help to find an oncologist willing to treat me. She called in a favor and got me an appointment with the best oncologist in Central Florida. Now that I had an oncologist, it was time to begin treatment and talk to my children. How do you explain breast cancer to a 4 and 5-year-old? I still don't know the answer to that, but Andre and I did our best to be honest with them. We explained that mama's hair will fall out, but I would still be beautiful. We explained that mama would be tired and sick, but their hugs and kisses would help give me strength. Overall, they showed an incredible amount of maturity and strength for their ages. Though I must admit, my daughter had a hard time dealing with my hair loss. My treatment was aggressive. It had to be to fight such an aggressive form of cancer. I fought through 18 grueling rounds of chemotherapy that caused sickness so severe that by the end of it, I truly believed that one more treatment would kill me. I fought through a bilateral mastectomy that meant a permanent change to my body and my sense of womanhood. And I fought through 6.5 weeks of 5-day-a-week radiation that burned my skin so badly, the radiation oncologist considered placing me in the burn unit. I went through hell, but I fought every step of the way. I fought for myself, but more so, I fought for my family because I knew that they needed me, and I was determined to stay here with them. Though cancer made me physically weak, at the same time, it gave me a strength I didn't even know I had. As I progressed through treatment, I began sharing my story and quickly learned that I was not alone. There were too many women, particularly African American women, who had to fight to get a proper diagnosis because they were too young to have cancer. There were too many women out there who were afraid to burden their families with their diagnosis, so they kept it a secret. There were too many women who didn't seek treatment at all because of the financial burden it would place on them and their family. So I continued to share my story and encourage others to be diligent about their breast health. But what I learned most from sharing my story was the importance of being your own best advocate. From the beginning of my breast cancer journey, I had to advocate for myself and for what I needed. Through sharing my story, I encouraged others to be their own best advocates and to ask for what they need as they move through their personal cancer journey, and to not stop until they get the support that they needed to get through it. In May 2012, my journey with inflammatory breast cancer came to an end when I completed radiation and was deemed cancer-free. I returned to my pre-breast cancer life and began to live again, without the dark cloud of cancer hanging over me. I graduated from law school in 2014 and moved my family back to the Pacific Northwest soon after. Everything was going well until 6 years after my initial diagnosis, when I fell ill while traveling home from a speaking at a breast cancer event in Florida. While on the plane, I became short of breath and passed out in the aisle. When I came to, there was a small crowd of flight attendants and passengers around me. One of the passengers was a doctor, and she asked if I had any health problems or if I was on any medication. I told her no, but I shared that I was taking tamoxifen for breast cancer, but I was cancer-free. She urged me to follow up with my doctor when I got home. Once I was off the plane, I noticed I was still short of breath, but felt okay overall. The following day, I began to cough and assumed I had caught a cold while traveling. After a few more days of feeling very sick with a painful cough and shortness of breath, I started to think I had pneumonia, which I had had before. My doctor started me on antibiotics and said I should feel better in a few days. After another week, I was feeling worse and I could barely breathe. My doctor prescribed more antibiotics. Another week went by and I still wasn't any better. I went in to see my doctor, and by the time I walked the short distance from the elevator to the front desk, I was so out of breath, I fainted. My doctor was still convinced I had pneumonia and urged me to try a third round of antibiotics, but something in my gut told me this was something else, something antibiotics wasn't going to fix. I asked for a referral to a pulmonologist, and after some convincing, I received it. When I met with the pulmonologist, she too believed I had pneumonia, but she placed me on oxygen, and I was able to convince her that I should get a CT scan to be sure what was happening in my body. She agreed, and the CT scan did indeed show something, but she wasn't quite sure what it was. So she referred me to a thoracic surgeon for a lung biopsy. The surgeon prepared me for the possibility that I may have lung disease, and I again anxiously awaited biopsy results. Once home from the surgery, I quickly became ill again and was unable to breathe. Andre rushed me to the emergency room where they got me stabilized and transferred me to the ICU. As I sat in the ICU room alone, a doctor I had never met before came in and delivered shocking news. You have stage 4 metastatic breast cancer. It cannot be cured, but it can be treated. Unfortunately, it will probably be the thing that kills you. I was angry at the coldness in which this news was delivered to me. But I was even more angry that again, I was going to have to call my husband and tell him news that I was sure was going to shatter his world. I was angry that my kids were going to have to endure watching me fight cancer again. And this time, none of us knew what the outcome was going to be. I was 37. I had been diagnosed with metastatic breast cancer in my lungs. I was oxygen dependent, and I felt like my life was quickly fading away. I prayed for guidance and peace. I prayed for clarity so that when I woke up in the morning, I would know what to do and how to handle this. And sure enough, it came. I woke up with a plan to find out as much as I could about metastatic breast cancer and my treatment options. As I began researching metastatic breast cancer, I found that treatment options had greatly advanced in recent years, and it was no longer an immediate death sentence, but it was still a very scary disease with a very poor prognosis. Research suggests that the life expectancy of someone with stage 4 metastatic breast cancer is 1.5 to 2 years. As I read those statistics, I decided two things. One, those statistics wouldn't apply to me. They couldn't apply to me because I had too much living to do. I had to live to see my children graduate from high school, graduate from college, get married, and have children of their own. I called out to God. I bargained with God and pleaded for more time. The second thing I decided was that it was time to take action. I again took the reins and began advocating for myself, making my wishes clear to every doctor involved in my care. I wanted the most aggressive treatment, and I wanted it fast. It was time to fight and fight hard. So I began treatment, this time knowing that while the treatment would eventually change, it would never end, and I would have to endure some form of treatment for the rest of my life if I wanted a chance to live. Another way I took action was by becoming involved with Komen, Oregon's African American Initiative. The aim of the African American Initiative is to address disparities among African American women, particularly around late-stage diagnosis and mortality rates. This initiative is so important because despite similar screening rates, Black women are 40% more likely to die from breast cancer than white women. As Komen's African American Initiative Manager, I am working with our community and our health systems to collect data and identify the interventions needed to address these disparities and save lives. As I enter my third year of living with metastatic breast cancer, I want you to know one thing: I deserve to live. I deserve the opportunity to see my children grow up. I deserve to grow old with my husband. I deserve to be able to make plans for the future without wondering if I'll live to see those plans come to fruition. I deserve to live. If you believe that I and all of us living with breast cancer deserve to live, I ask you to support Susan G. Komen Organ in Southwest Washington so Komen can continue to support people like me by funding research that focuses on finding effective treatment options until there is a cure for breast cancer, and programming like our Treatment Access Program that eliminates barriers for those who have to travel for breast cancer treatment. With your support, we can make a difference. Thank you.